Russia's brutal conquest of Siberia, war, lies, and the dark mechanisms of empire.
Forget the heroes. Forget the grand armies. This is the truth of conquest. It's not just about bullets and battles. It's about disease, greed for fur, and a cynical brutality that strips a people down to nothing. We're going to a place of endless darkness and freezing terror, Siberia. And we're looking at how Russia built the largest country on Earth, not with glory, but with genocide, lies, and pure, cold-blooded mechanism.
The Wild East, a hidden history of brutality.
Think of the American Wild West, the march to the Pacific, the superior firepower crushing native life. Now, look across the Bering Sea. A mirror image, a similar, sordid saga of conquest and genocide. This is Russia's Wild East, the conquest of Siberia. Siberia, 13 million square kilometers of taiga, tundra, and frozen hell, home to dozens of diverse, unique native nations. Nomadic or semi-nomadic, centered around reindeer herding. Animists, speaking to the spirits of the rivers and sky. A world of deep, ancient culture. But one resource brought the horror. Furs. Lynx, sable, Arctic fox. Thick, soft, luscious pelts. A symbol of nobility across Asia. And a river of wealth through the eyes of a hungry new power. The rising Tsardom of Russia. Long before the Tsardom, Novgorodian explorers were already probing the Urals for pelts, setting the tone with violent attempts at forcing tribute. The natives pushed back. They fought. But in the 16th century, Moscow rose, and the real darkness began.
Mechanism 1. The mercenary and the muscle. The Yermak expedition. This is the first practical lesson in brutal conquest. Outsource the dirtiest work. When the Siberian Khanate, led by Kuchum, rejected Russian vassalage, Tsar Ivan the Terrible was busy fighting the grueling Livonian War. He didn't send his army. He turned to the Stroganovs, merchant lords, and gave them a license to raise a private army. The man they hired? A Cossack bandit and vagabond named Yermak, a criminal with a price on his head. The payment for this monstrous task? A pardon, a get-out-of-jail-free card for mass murder. Yermak's force? 1,636 men. The mechanism of war? Guns. Muskets against an enemy with no gunpowder weaponry. At the Battle of Chuvash Cape, Yermak's Cossacks blasted their way through a Siberian force several times their size. The Khanate of Sidir was annexed. Practical takeaway 1. The dark power of proxies. A brutal regime doesn't get its own hands dirty. It hires proxies. The Cossacks were autonomous military societies, rejecting Moscow's full control, but their soldiering skill was versatile. And here's the key. The state gave them no pay. They were encouraged to earn their profits with plunder extracted from indigenous Siberians. This is an incentivized brutality. The state encourages the cruelest fantasies of mercenaries, turning conquest into a profit-driven atrocity.
Mechanism 2, biological warfare and strategic division. As the Cossacks marched east, conquering a new territory the size of the modern Netherlands every year, they unlocked the second, most devastating mechanism: disease and division. Think of the odds. Tsardom of Russia, population 10 million. Siberia, population 300,000, divided among dozens of languages and cultures. The smallpox, the measles, the flu, diseases the natives had no immunity to. Smallpox alone reaped a macabre harvest. It tragically wiped out over 80% of the Tongass and Yakut populations. This isn't just conquest, this is a biological catastrophe clearing the way for the invader. Practical takeaway 2. Weaponize weakness. How do you conquer a land 54 times larger than Britain with a small band of mercenaries? You don't fight them all at once. You exploit their natural divisions. You let the disease do the heavy lifting. The Russians, like the US in their own Wild West, spread the same germs and exploited the same advantages. A war against a scattered, diverse enemy already weakened by a plague is no longer a fair fight. It's an execution.
Mechanism 3. The Yasok extortion racket. Once conquered, the brutality shifted to economic enslavement. The Yasok. This was an extortion racket. Native Siberian nations were forced to provide a regular tribute of valuable animal skins to their nearest wooden fortress, the Ostrogs. Let's talk money. In the 17th century, a single sable pelt could sell for 10 times what a peasant family earned in a year. The Siberian fur trade went global, fueling Russia's wars in Europe. Tsar Peter the Great used a state monopoly on sable furs to fund the astronomically expensive Great Northern War. The wealth of the conquered funded the future conquests. Practical takeaway 3. The cycle of extraction. Frontier governors were also not paid by the government. They were expected to nourish themselves of what they could extract from the natives. This created a perfect, self-perpetuating system of exploitation. The incentive to be brutal was doubled. The state gets its tribute, and the local officials get rich. When trappers, die Promischliniki, failed to bag their own pelts, they didn't just go home. They terrorized the natives. They kidnapped indigenous women and children, holding them hostage and selling them back to their own men for a sable pelt apiece. This is a level of inhumane calculation that few histories tell you about. The economy of the empire ran on the tears and terror of the enslaved. The untamed fury, resistance, and resilience. But here's the thing about true darkness. It breeds unbreakable light. In the Far East, the Cossacks met the Koryaks, Itelmens, and Chukchis, warlike, ferocious peoples with lamellar armor made of whale skin and bone. The Cossacks' inhumane treatment, the Yasak, the enslavement of women and children, did something unexpected. It united formerly warring clans against the Russian menace. In 1706, they erupted into open rebellion. They took Ostrogs, seized muskets, and learned to operate them remarkably quickly. The Russians responded with Major Dmitry Pavluksky, a man who utilized terror tactics, presiding over mass slaughters and enslavement. The Senate of Empress Catherine, 6,000 kilometers away from St. Petersburg, ordered the total extirpation of the Koryak and Chukchi people. They demanded complete ethnic cleansing. But the natives refused to disappear. They savaged themselves upon the Russians, even capturing and beheading the reviled Major Pavlutsky. The Russians were forced to abandon their genocide plans. It was simply impractical due to the feral resistance. The ultimate lesson, the price of freedom. The Chukchis were never fully subdued. They never paid the Yasak tribute. Their territory was simply too remote, and their people too warlike and determined. They did not accept Russian overlordship until after the Revolution of 1917, making them the only Siberian people to never be conquered by the empire of the Tsars. They traded their lives for their freedom, and that, in the face of mechanized clinical brutality, is the only currency that matters. Conclusion: the shadow that remains. By the 18th century, Russia had become the largest contiguous land empire on Earth. Today, indigenous peoples only make up about 5% of Siberia's population. The rest is overwhelmingly ethnic Russian, with cities like Vladivostok cementing a permanent presence. Yet, the natives are still here. They outlasted the Cossacks, survived the cultural Russification, the turmoil of the revolution, and the devastating Soviet collectivization. The conquest of Siberia is not a footnote in history. It is a story of mechanism, a blueprint for how empires are truly built. Through cynical outsourcing, biological devastation, economic slavery, and the strategic shattering of a people's unity. You've seen the darkness. Now you know the real mechanisms of war and empire. Don't let history be a simple story of kings and armies. Understand the real systems at play. Identify the lies, the dark incentives, and the proxies in your own world, whether they are historical or modern. Know your enemy's mechanism. That is the only way to build true resilience. If you want more deep dives into the shadows of history, the stuff they don't teach in school, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Like this video if you found this information powerful. We'll catch you on the next one.